Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Reddit Roasts, where we dissect people's profiles on Reddit without them asking. Mal, there's a plant missing from behind you. What happened there?
I killed them. I've
Right.
committed plant filicide, so that's great.
Right. Let's dive into the first profile. um, sure. Do you want to run through this, Mal?
Yeah, so today we've got quite a fun bunch actually. We've got a few engineers with cool hobbies. I'm doing a usual intro, Sam. We've got quite a few Indians who are in Canada at the moment. We've also got, and this is common for every roast, we've got some really rubbish GPAs in there as well, mixed in there. And we're wondering if their work experience will compensate for that. And finally, of course, there's the usual big four crop of consultants, and we're going to see how they're going to stand out in that competitive bracket. All right, so our profile one for today is a 25-year-old male civil engineer who's taking his MBA application seriously again after taking the GMAT. No idea where I stand. Background, degree, Bachelor's of Civil Engineering from a top five school in Canada, GPA 3.2, but there is an upward trajectory there. GMAT 730, taken 2 years ago. Work experience, 4.5 years of experience and matriculation, recently promoted to project manager, looking after design large tactical defense projects, secret and top secret levels. Okay. Research publication as a second author in a biomechanics journal, extracurriculars, volunteer firefighter, and an engineer without borders project mentor. Ethnicity, minority group within North Africa, but not Black, raised in Canada, target consulting infrastructure advisory. All right, I think that's all for this person's profile. What do you think of this?
Yeah. What an interesting profile. So from the start, let's talk about it academically. Look, a 3.2 GPA is one of those rubbish GPAs you were referring to in the introduction, I think. That is not ideal. For context, I have the Chicago Booth class profile open here. And if you see that their GPA average is 3.6 with a 2.5 to 3.2 range. So a 3.2 GPA for this applicant is okay, but it's not ideal. So we'll talk maybe a bit about how that can be mitigated. GMAT is also a little bit below the Chicago Booth average of like 335 or so. So it's GMAT's not the issue, but it's not entirely compensating for the weak GPA. So that's academically okay. I think was this the one? Did this profile have a CFA in it, if I remember rightly, or was that maybe mentioned in the comments? Have a quick
No,
look.
I think that's not.
That's another profile. Okay, ignore that then. So that's the academics. I think demographic. Look, this North African heritage that OP talks about is beneficial. Just from that brings an interesting perspective to the program. North Africa as a region is underrepresented, but Canada's not so much. So, that will depend on kind of passports and things. If OP can position themselves as North African, it might be a slight benefit there. Extracurriculars, these are really solid, right? Volunteer firefighter, okay, not been doing it for too long, but by the time OP comes around to applying, maybe that's become a more substantial extracurricular. Engineers Without Borders project mentor, that is a fantastic extracurricular from a leadership perspective, from a community perspective. Lots of value add there. That's probably one of OP's strengths. Professional, now all this top secret stuff sounds pretty cool, but to really dig into it, I'm not entirely clear whether this is public sector or private sector. If that is a defense startup, that's a very different profile from working in the public sector, doing defense sort of for the government. There's a bit of a nuance there. So I'm not sure I fully understand OP's job, but it definitely sounds like OP's been involved in some impactful projects just based on that top secret stuff. We can talk about how to maybe frame that in a good way in the essays. The other thing that might be worth noting here is that if this work is really secret, there might be some difficulty getting letters of recommendation. So that might be a negative in that way. So it'll depend on whether OP can get recommenders to really vouch for them. If the work's like secret, they might just turn around and say, "No, I don't want to be a recommender," and then it's like, "What do you do?" So that will be a something to consider. So overall, a fairly strong profile, held back a bit by that GPA, but good in other ways.
Right. And OP's first question is this competitive? Is this profile competitive for M7 schools?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think OP should be including M7s in the mix. The way I see this, everything except for the GPA is at M7 levels. Great
Mhm.
extracurriculars, the work experience relevant. Everything except for the GPA is at M7 levels. But the GPA is the GPA, and that is important because it feeds into the class average, which feeds into the rankings. 3.2 is low for a male candidate applying to M7s for sure. Um, I would say throw an M7 or two, throw a few M7 applications into the mix, but don't be surprised if they get torpedoed by the GPA and you end up in a T10. I think that's where OP would probably be focused.
All right. Okay, and OP's other question is, so what does he need to work on then in that case?
I wouldn't say a major overhaul. It's more about how to position what he's already got. So framing these extracurriculars as really beneficial on society and on on his local community. That firefighter role, there might be a community aspect that he can weave into that. Schools care a lot about whether you are contributing actively to your community because they want people who are going to contribute actively to their community. So that kind of makes sense. This is all this in this engineer without borders. There might be some management responsibility that OP can talk about there, particularly as a project mentor. So framing the extracurriculars is going to be important. The second thing is going to be writing an optional essay to explain this rubbish GPA. I think there is a story there because in the last 2 years, OP says he has a 3.8. So writing an optional essay that talks about why the first years were low grades, how you managed to improve them, and highlighting this upwards trend, that will be beneficial and that'll be important. So again, this is all about framing what OP has already got and already done. I would start planning the letters of recommendation as well. As I mentioned, that might be difficult for OP professionally. And if it is, maybe start talking to the firefighting manager, the Engineer Without Borders managers. Maybe there's other people from sort of previous roles that OP can talk about. So that will be something that OP can already start doing, particularly if they're going to be difficult. And then I'd also say, like, start thinking about the narrative, right? All schools, all of these M7s, T10s that OP's targeting, one of the questions is going to be, so what do you want to do in your career and why? And this is sort of jumping to mind because of a client that I worked with a year or so ago who had a similar secret, top secret kind of badge on the work he was doing. And he started his career goals essay with top secret. The email hit my inbox. And like you can use this to create quite an exciting professional narrative, quite an interesting professional narrative. But that takes time. So I would say another thing that OP can start doing is starting to build that narrative, whether that's conversations with consultants, whether that's brainstorming to come up with the interesting moment OP is going to use, whether that's creating goals that feed off that professional experience. All really interesting angles that OP could work towards in a career goals essay, and OP can already get started with that.
Okay, that's all of OP's questions. Should we move on to our next profile?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Male ORM engineer hoping to get a sanity check. All
Mm-hmm.
right. This is a male Pakistani Canadian applicant, 33, bachelor's in engineering from a no-name local school in Canada, 8.5 years of work experience, 3 years of political organizing and fundraising for a national political party, and 5.5 years of sales engineering in North American manufacturing firms. Also,
Mm.
a licensed professional engineer, 318 GRE, currently in grad school, currently doing their master's in public policy on a merit-based scholarship at U Chicago. Extracurriculars, lots there. Co-founded an orphan sponsorship charity, raised $800K, still actively raising $1 million annually. powerlifting, broke two weightlifting records, and president of the Religious Students Association in college. Extracurriculars now is working in TV commercials in Canada, volleyball with master's friends, and still powerlifting, but not competitively. Goals, PE, either deals or operation size, or PE consulting. Why I'll think I'll succeed in PE. Some background here. I helped with 3 successful ETA acquisitions, 2 in Canada, 1 in California, and have 3 years of freelance consulting experience on deals and separately educational content development for an accelerator. Why masters? Want to understand public policy, maybe pursue opportunities, political opportunities later on. Preferred programs M7, but also open to T15. What do you think? There's a lot going on here. What do you think of OP's profile?
And crucially, they're preparing to rewrite the GRE. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So academically, then, this is a asking for a sanity check. I just made a note. Well, maybe we call, if we're going to ever rebrand Reddit roasts, maybe we call them a sanity check. But don't laugh. Yeah, that's terrible. Anyway, if we look at academics, look, 70 out of 100. Reasonable. I don't think that's a train wreck, but it's also, no name school in Canada. I don't think academically is particularly outstanding. And as OP has alluded to there, 318 GRE is not ideal. Particularly if OP is aiming for M7s. That is weak. So academically, nothing to write home about. Demographically, Pakistani Canadian, I think we said, is certainly an ORM group, not quite as ORM as like an Indian male engineer, but getting there. So definitely ORM overrepresented on the demographic side, plus 8.5 years of experience is on the older side as well, particularly if that's 8.5 years of work experience now, which should be more like 9.5 or so at time of matriculation. In MBA world, that is old. So demographics, not ideal. Extracurriculars, really interesting extracurriculars, particularly, I mean, things like these random world records, these weightlifting records, these things. I mean, I don't know if that's a world record, to be fair, but like, still, those records like that, they show something. They show some grit. They show some determination, ability to achieve something you set your mind to. They'll like that. They will love the co-founding the sponsorship, the sponsorship charity. Obviously, this is really, really strong community contribution and lots of potential essays coming out of that. And then leadership responsibility in the Religious Students Association. I'm not sure if that's during undergrad, right? So this is not. It shows a habit of leadership, but it's not recent. More recent, these are some quite interesting extracurriculars as well. So good ECs. Professional. This is where, to me, things get interesting. So I'm not sure whether OP is a finance applicant because of this kind of finance due diligence he's been doing, whether he's an engineer because he's a licensed professional engineer and that looks like what he started with and what he studied, or whether he's a political kind of politics angle with a political party. So to me, the professional experience is really, really interesting, but maybe like too broad. Unless OP can narrow that down and really find a focus area, it'll TBD whether that acts for him or against him, basically. And we'll talk about what OP can do to make that beneficial. The goals. Now, again, we'll talk about this in more detail, but I'm not in love with the goals. Private equity, for lots and lots of reasons, is a very difficult post-MBA goal. I'm not sure OP's got the hardcore finance experience to justify that, and schools are going to be wary of that. They can, nevertheless, goals can be changed, so not the end of the world, but worth bearing in mind. So overall, a solid profile, very varied, will hinge a lot on whether OP can get that GRE higher. He says in that comment at the end there that he's hoping for a mid 320s before applying. Mid 320s would be okay. It still wouldn't be standout. So, okay, solid profile, but I think that GRE, it's a lot hinging on that.
Okay. And what do you think OP's chances are for M7 and T15 schools? I see OP has some comments as well where he's added additional questions.
Uh-huh.
Um, if you scroll down, I think there is one about, yeah, up there, yeah, on the top, other schools. Although I prefer HPS, I am open to other notable programs with the exception of Booth. I prefer
Mm.
two top-tier alma maters versus two masters from the same parent uni. I also already have lots of amazing friends at Booth. What are your
Mm.
thoughts on CBS for my profile?
Yeah, okay. We're not even going to talk about HBS until that GRE gets raised. Right. There's even the mid 320s that OP's targeting, I don't think is high enough for HBS given that demographic.
Mhm.
So let's focus on CBS. I do think that if PE goals are what end up being written about, CBS would be a great school for those goals. The question is that achievable for OP? Um, I think that this sort of links into the next question that we had ready. So why don't we move on to talk about the forward-looking profile?
Right. So I think there's another in the comments itself. It's like I've been struggling to explain the why now with respect
Uh-huh.
to my age and my current level of work experience.
Ah, that's here.
Yeah, how do you think that OP can tackle that?
Okay. So let's go back up to the profile overall. So why this matters is that all schools are going to ask OP, why do you want to do an MBA? Right? They're
Yeah.
all going to ask that. And at the moment, the well, the classic kind of reason is, well, I want to pivot my career or I want to grow in my existing career. It's going to be a career related answer. And typically there are some skills that you need from the MBA in order to reach those goals. Now, in this case, the why now comes comes back to the breadth of experience. For most candidates, there is a fairly logical career journey that has been happening, and they on that career journey they reach a level where they need new modeling skills, they need new leadership skills, etc. And that's why the MBA comes in to unlock the next kind of natural chapter in that journey. But I have no idea what the natural chapter in this journey is. And therefore, how are you going to argue that you need an MBA to reach a chapter that we don't know that is unclear? What OP is currently thinking is that the ETA acquisitions, so these acquisitions that OP has been helping with from a due diligence perspective, he's going to say, I've done this in a small way and I want to do it in a big PE firm. That's what I think he's thinking right now. The schools are going to say, yeah, but big PE firms require really hardcore finance experience, graduate leadership programs at investment banks, typically. And you can look at the job descriptions of top PE firms that are recruiting analysts, post MBA associates, etc. And they will nearly always say experience in investment banking is appreciated. And the schools know this. So if OP's goals are, I want to go into private equity, and the schools are going to see that and they're going to say, that's going to be really tough for you because you haven't got that investment banking experience, that hardcore finance training. And yeah, we can give you a few classes in modeling, financial modeling, etc., during the MBA, but that will not necessarily be enough to break into hardcore private equity roles. So there's a real strong question mark there over whether that logical narrative makes sense. So to be constructive about this, what I would generally advise people to think about doing in this position when PE is their goal is to add a short-term goal that is investment banking in there. The
Mhm.
graduate training programs and the kind of MBA rotation programs from investment banks will move you between different teams, will really give you some quick and real world experience using your financial modeling skills. He's done due diligence on deals, but these are peanuts, what he's been working on. Doing due diligence on a real transaction from an investment bank, that is the sort of hardcore training that he's going to need to be able to break into private equity. So I would suggest adding a short-term goal of investment banking, and then you've got kind of a logical finance narrative that starts with, I was involved in this deal. It was small, but it was exciting. It made me realize I'm missing certain skills. That's why I want to do an MBA, where I'm going to focus on valuation classes, building my financial toolkit. After the MBA, I'm going to build that financial toolkit further in investment banking by joining a bulge bracket bank in an associate type role. Within 3 to 5 years, which is, by the way, how Columbia asked the question, within 3 to 5 years, I aim to pivot to private equity, particularly a New York-based private equity firm such as, and then name a couple of specific PE firms that are involved in the sector that OP has experience in. We don't know what those are, but here we know very clearly that there is he'll have a sector focus so far. And that's basically the career essay. So the why now is pivoting from like small fries into the real world and doing PE at a large scale. And that could work. Bit of a convoluted answer there, quite long and drawn out, but hopefully, OP, that's giving you some material to work with.
All right. Okay, and I see one more question that OP had in the comments. What about the GRE score? So what kind of GRE score would someone with my age profile, non-target undergrad need to go from a long shot to serious contender for M7s, including HPS and GSP?
Yeah. 330 plus. 330 plus. That equates to about 730, 740 on the old GMAT, which is a little bit above their average at CBS, at HBS. So above CBS, HBS average, which is about 330 or thereabouts, is where OP needs to be targeting. With a strong quant score. That's the answer. And that's what's going to be needed. And they're going to think, look, you're at grad school already. You're in kind of university mode. You're in study mode. No reason why you can't get a high GRE score. That's what it's going to take.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else that OP can do to improve the profile? Is there?
I guess the only other thing we haven't talked about is the work experience. 8.5 years, as I alluded to before, which it looks like 8.5 years of already passed, which means 9.5 at matriculation, which is the stat that they publish. That is high. That is old for MBA world. So a couple of things on that. OP should make sure that his management experience is coming through, because that's kind of the reason why schools bring in more experienced candidates, is to bring that management contribution, that management perspective. So make sure that comes through clearly. And then the other thing is to consider schools with higher work experience averages. Like INSEAD's the one that jumps to mind, but generally speaking, the 1-year programs have higher work experience averages, and they are going to look at 8.5, 9.5 years as, within their regular activities. Whereas a 2-year program in the US with like 4.5 years, 5 years of average work experience, you're at nearly double that. They're going to really have to scratch their heads to break the mold and bring you in. Certainly not a conventional profile. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not a conventional profile for them. So I would also be looking at the 1-year programs and the programs with higher average work experience as well.
All right. Okay. I think that's all for OP. Are we ready for our next profile?
Yeah, let's do it.
Am I cooked in CF?
Am I Gen Z? Yes, yes, you are.
I intend to take the GMAT in 6 to 9 months, so no GMAT score yet. My profile is as follows: male, 28 years old, Australian, bachelor's and master's degree from a top 50 world university with a not so great GPA, 2.9 on conversion, but is a distinction in Australia. That's interesting. 4.5 years of experience, 5.5 at the time of the application. 1 year at Deloitte, will be 2 years at matriculation. Senior consultant in strategy and AI team in Australia. Many international projects I see there. Deloitte projects, lots of Fortune 500, Max 7 government, Navy, defense projects. 3.5 years at a Fortune 500 engineering firm as well. 2 years spent as part of a global future leaders development program, worked across UK, Poland, Europe and Australia, I see there. 1.5 years in the strategy team in Australia, post the leadership program, and currently also maintaining an active LinkedIn alumni networking group with 400 members across 20 plus countries. Side hustle, exported Australian wine from local vineyards to Hong Kong and China. So this is an opportunity in 2022, travel to China 4 times in 2 years, a few extracurriculars there based in China, in the yacht club, jockey club, whale club. Wow, okay.
No,
Discontinued.
pitching to clients at those
Oh,
places. So it's a sort of entrepreneurship hustle story, I think.
yeah, but discontinued, I see as well due to other commitments. Other extracurriculars, travel to 30 plus countries and compete in Ironman, which I think is a triathlon, right? The next
No, it's
Ironman.
long distance running, I think.
Right, okay. So that's also quite international. So lots there. What do you think?
Mm. Yeah, very international profile overall. Okay, let's break it down. So academically, look, this is interesting on the 2.9 GPA. Like, we need to get this
Yeah.
clear. Generally speaking, this is why we don't convert, why the schools don't want you to convert your GPA, because the difference between 2.9, which is a train wreck in America, and distinction in Australia with a weighted average of 73%, which I think is a first in the UK system, if I'm not mistaken. Like, those are dramatically different numbers, dramatically different, like the difference between getting admitted and not. So this is generally why we advise and why schools ask, do not convert your GPA, because it could lead to real distortions. I'm going to assume then that this is a solid GPA. I might be wrong on that, but I'm going to assume that it's solid. I'm going to go with that 73% unconverted number. Okay, so keep going. So academically, solid. Next, demographic. Now, Australian, underrepresented generally. There's always a solid cohort of Australians, 2 or 3 kind of per class, but not many. So it definitely puts you at an advantage. The extracurriculars are interesting. I particularly like the hustle, right? This idea of selling Australian wine to Chinese people, that is awesome. That's a kind of entrepreneurial story that could easily make up a good essay for INSEAD, for example. I like the Ironman as well. I think that shows grit. And I think there was something about a LinkedIn community as well. Did I see that?
Employment, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
this LinkedIn alumni group, like that shows community building and is the kind of post MBA activity that the schools like, the kind of the person who manages the alumni and connects with the schools, etc. That's great. Now, professional. A year at Deloitte and doing a whole bunch of projects, and before that, Fortune 500 engineering firm. Now, this is strong in that very solid training, particularly the rotation program. Schools will really like that, but it does position OP right in the midst of the most typically difficult and competitive pool, which is the management consultants, the strategy consultants. If OP is going to be right up against the McKinseys, the Bains, the BCGs, all of the other big fours, a lot of whom are going to be sponsored for their MBAs, a lot of whom are going to have really strong undergrads and really strong GMATs. So the key word for OP and kind of that captures everything here is you got to be unique. Unique is the key word. You got to find ways, whatever it takes, to differentiate your profile. Just going on stats alone is not going to get you admitted. So OP has to really find a unique angle. So overall, a strong profile, strong potential profile, but will come down almost entirely to how unique OP can make their profile.
Okay. And OP does have a question. I am yet to begin GMAT preparation, and I intend to take it in 6 to 9 months from now. That's at the
Okay.
top.
Okay.
My question is whether a strong GMAT and broad work experience could compensate for that below average GPA.
This is interesting. So here he's saying that the GPA is below average, but he's also saying distinction with a 73 down here. So, okay, let's answer the question as it stands, which is assuming that that GPA is low, then yes, the GMAT is about the only thing that you can do to compensate for that. Certainly the most impactful thing that you can do to compensate for that. What level are we talking? Well, if this GPA is really a 2.9, that is substantially below the average of INSEAD, for example, and your GMAT or GRE would need to be substantially above the average, like a lot. GRE 330 plus, GMAT 695, 705 kind of level plus to compensate for a 2.9 GPA. But again, it's unclear to me whether that GPA is going to come through strongly or not. But I wouldn't say cooked, but I would say, yeah, time to knuckle down. That's the key. That GMAT is going to be the key distinguishing factor now, besides the uniqueness of the professional narrative.
Right. And I don't see a mention of OP's goals anywhere. What kind of goals do you think OP is, best positioned to write about?
Yeah, I mean, I know what OP is going to be thinking. The kind of knee-jerk reaction for most Big Four consultants is to say, "I want to transition into MBB,"
Mhm.
which could work. OP certainly has the consulting and strategy experience for that, but that is also what the sponsored McKinsey people are saying and the sponsored Bain people are saying, which is I'm going to go back to my firm, and those people have a guaranteed return offer from McKinsey or Bain, and you're going to go against them.
Mm.
I'm not sure that's ideal. I would prefer to focus on a strategy role in an industry that OP likes. So, just kind of off the top of my head, the examples that I had, it might be something that builds on this trading experience, on this Australia-China trading experience. Maybe join a company that is involved in both of those markets. That would make sense. And that way you can combine your professional experience with your hobbies, and that would make a nice, logical, really quite unique narrative. Another one might be Ironman related. Maybe there's a company, I have no idea, but maybe there's a company that organizes Ironmans and maybe they need a strategy director. OP would be absolutely perfect for that role. And again, that would be a unique and interesting post MBA goal that differentiates OP. Another example, a bit more standard, might be something strategy related for a sports company like Nike, for example, Nike, as the Americans would say. So a goal that combines OP's interests with OP's professional experience would be really nice. Now, the last thing I'd like to mention on this is the international angle of OP's profile is really aligned with INSEAD. Now, OP is clearly focused on INSEAD, and I think rightly so. We have a lot of people asking about INSEAD purely for visa reasons. They don't want to go to America, so they're like, what's the next best school? And it's INSEAD. And they're not really naturally a good fit for that school. OP is a good fit for that school. What do I mean by that? What do INSEAD look for when they're trying to assess this international fit? One, do you speak a second language? It sounds like OP might speak Mandarin and English, China, Australia. If so, like really, really nice international language experience. That's one. Two, they look for professional experience in different countries. OP has got this global rotation program, which hits that nail on the head. Work experience in all of these different countries. That's fantastic for INSEAD. Also positive is the China venture, right? That is entrepreneurial experience in a new market. That is catnip to INSEAD. So, in terms of fit, I think OP has a really, really good fit with INSEAD. And I would also add that the UK programs would love this international experience as well. Oxford, Cambridge, LBS should definitely be in the mix also. Australians also have quite a nice time with visa applications in the UK, etc. So for me, this is a 4-school application: INSEAD, Oxford, Cambridge, LBS.
Okay. And do you think OP has a chance in US M7 schools or T15s?
Yeah, possibly. Again, goes really up against the MBB clients, the MBB applicants for that pool, but relatively low work experience or like kind of on the average for US programs. So yeah, give US a shot as well. maybe consider US and Europe, UK application kind of in parallel and see where everything falls. Obviously, the visa questions in the US are a bit unknown at the moment, so it's a good hedge to have both. And if OP is going to focus on the US, yeah, T10, M7, depending on where that GMAT shows up.
All right. Okay, great. I think we're ready for a last profile of the day, Simon.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. T15 roast, not M7. Okay, 32 male Indian education GPA is not a traditional GPA. There's a 77.8 out of 100 and third in the class of 60. Undergrad engineering, electrical and electronics engineering. Also did a postgrad at UT Dallas Jindal School of Management with a 3.485 GPA in data engineering and data science. Work experience 7.5 years, 2.5 in India, working for a tech consultancy as a data engineer, 5 years in the US, working at a small size US tech staffing company, then at Amazon, and then at another top tech staffing company as a senior data engineer. Test scores GRE 313. OP knows that this is a bad score for his demographic. ECs, lots of ECs. In school, the National Cadet Corps.
Oh.
Yep, lots was there. College event lead. Also did the NSS National Service Scheme. Student coordinator for lots of school on-campus events and blood donation camps, health camps. At Amazon was the fun SPOC for the floor for 120 plus employees. In India, at my work I was the client employer relation SPOC, scheduling sessions and assisting new joiners, family stuff as well. Assisted my family in a privately owned K10 400 plus school management activities and school development. Assisted family in bookkeeping and warehouse management in family-owned food grain trade business. Hearthstone, I think that's a video game. Legend level player, Dota 2 divine level player, numismatic collector, 1,000 plus coins, all collected by myself, trade leaps and other option strategies. Wow, what hasn't OP done at this point? But that's a lot. Okay, let's move on to the short-term goals consultant. Due to my data engineering skills, working on multiple projects. Now wants to get into consulting long term, start a hedge fund or become a senior partner at a top consulting firm. Currently on H-1B visa. I see some specifics about what OP did in their undergrad, but yeah, as per OP's request, roast me so I can improve.
Let's do it. Okay. Academically, third in class of 60 from a undergrad from a tier 1 university is solid for sure. 313, on the other hand, is poo. That, as OP has alluded to, is bad, particularly from that verbal, right? So Q is out of 170. In fact, they're both out of 170. 145 verbal, that is a really weak score. Now, that right now is OP's Achilles heel, absolutely for sure, but he recognizes it, and so hopefully that score comes up. So academically has the potential to be good if the GRE improves, but at the moment not strong, particularly for his demographic, which is an Indian male engineer, which is about as overrepresented as it gets. He's got US experience, which helps, but still ORM. Also 7.5 years of work experience is on the high side. So, and then finally, data engineer is quite a common role, particularly at the moment as that sector has been overhauled in AI, etc. So quite a lot of, very overrepresented, lots of competition for OP professionally. Extracurriculars, I love these extracurriculars. What a random bunch. I think the ones that stand out is this fun, I'm going to call it fun Spock for Amazon. Like that's the kind of thing that schools will really, really like. And also there might be an opportunity to frame OP as a family business applicant. I'm not sure exactly how substantial this is and whether that's something OP has any interest in joining later. But there might be a long-term goal around family business, maybe, which would potentially be beneficial for OP's profile, or even just a backup role, which reassures that they're not going to be unemployed. So that's helpful. Short-term goals. I'm not in love with consulting as a goal. I don't think that's the right goal necessarily, but we'll talk about it. And And then in terms of professional, just a pure data, US tech data kind of role. Nothing, I'm not seeing anything particularly unique within that. And actually, interestingly, it doesn't make up that much of OP's, the real estate on their roast, on their profile. So I don't think there is a huge amount going there, although this management experience is going to be good leadership, good demonstration of leadership. So in all, strong profile held back by a weak GRE needs a narrative. I'm not seeing clearly what the narrative is yet. I don't love that goal either. So that's a start.
Right. And given OP's targets are T15,
Mm.
what are his chances?
Yeah, if you get the GRE up, I'd say, I know OP hasn't got it, I think specifically says not M7. I assume then, yeah, T15, kind of T10. I definitely think if OP can get that GRE into the ballpark that is 325 plus, T15 is on the cards.
Okay. And I know you touched on the goals a bit. Can you
Mm.
expand on that, on OP's choice of goals?
Yeah, look, the problem with consulting is that so many other people are saying consulting is their post MBA goals. Obviously, heaps of the consultants who are wanting to stay in that industry and maybe move into an MBB if they're Big Four right now. Maybe if they're MBB already and they're going to get sponsored by MBB and they're going to go back to MBB. Add in all of the industry people that see a paycheck at consulting and think, oh, I'm going to put consulting, and they see that lots of people came out of the MBA and went into consulting and they think, oh, I'm just going to put consulting. It's an incredibly competitive batch. And unless you've got a really strong angle, I generally would veer away from it. Now, if you were going to do that, what is OP's angle? Maybe it's like problem solving using data. And maybe there's a specific niche within consulting that OP can focus on. For example, McKinsey's like tech arm is called Quantum Black, and maybe OP can make their profile, their goals a little bit more unique by focusing on Quantum Black within MBB, for example. That would go some way towards standing out. But to me, the short-term goal should be I just think throw out consulting and focus on what's more genuine and more interesting. OP has a whole bunch of interests that it talks about here, whether it's coin collecting, whether it's education through the family business. Like there's loads of different angles that OP could play. I would focus on one of them. And the one that stands out for me from a professional perspective is this option strategy trading. Now, OP has data experience. OP is also involved in financial markets. I would encourage OP to look at quant finance as a short-term goal. And this is basically companies that are building algorithms to trade. So he's already building algorithms for his main job and he's trading option strategies anyway. Combining those together is quant finance. I would encourage OP to look up Jane Street, Citadel, Optiva, IMC, where I used to work. These are the quant finance trading like leaders. And that to me is a way more interesting goal than consulting and just as well paid and just as interesting, I would argue. So those short-term goals should just be thrown up, overhauled. And a short-term starting a hedge fund, that would also be a natural long-term goal after 3 to 5 years at a quant finance hub. So to me, that is the big change that OP needs to think about seriously.
Okay. All right. And what can OP do to strengthen his app besides this?
Key ones, Jerry. Can't emphasize this enough. Your demographic is incredibly strong. The Indian male engineers are incredibly strong test takers historically. And just, the schools don't publish this information, but if you were to look at the average GMAT, average GRE of that demographic on all of these programs, it's going to be a solid 30 points higher than the average of the overall class. That is going to be key. Then the other thing I would say is really focus on those goals. Think about a short-term and long-term career narrative that differentiates you from the millions and millions of consultants.
Yeah, I'm also interested in that family business. I know we spoke about how it is. I think
Mhm.
it's a food grain trade business, but there's also something about school management and student development. There's a fair bit
Yeah.
there, but yeah, that's
Yeah, here we go. Family owned food grain business. I think it doesn't sound like OP is particularly interested in getting involved in this, but OP it should be on your list of things to think about for a short or long term goal is to go back to this family business and bring a data driven angle to it. It sounds like a pretty old school business, and OP's got really, really good data experience. There is a world where you could say, I want to go back to my family business and bring a data angle, bring us into the 21st century, blah, blah, blah. Like there is a story there as well. I don't think it's as authentic for OP, but it would give you basically a guaranteed job after you graduate. And that would be, that would be a plus for OP, especially in this job market. So worth considering. And that's kind of conversation we have with clients about whether that's what OP should aim for.
all right. Okay, great. Thank you, Sam. That's all of our profiles today.
Awesome.
Let's do a bonus round.
Yeah, let's do it.
School versus school. Ross 80K versus Darden 100K. Need advice on the final call. Natasha here with a big dilemma. Hello, Natasha. After
Hello,
my
Natasha.
I tried negotiating with Darden, sharing my 80K scholarship from Ross. Darden came back with a 100K offer yesterday and has given me 14 days to make the deposit. I also hold an admit from Tuck without a scholarship, and I'm waitlisted at NYU Stern all through the GMAT waiver route. About my profile, 4.5 years at Tata Consultancy Services working on business facing consulting and transformation projects. OP wants to pivot into strategy and leadership roles and build long term impact at the intersection of business, people, scalable solutions. Genuinely torn. Ross or Darden? Would love to hear your thoughts, Sam.
Yeah. Okay. Um, First thing I would say before we talk about the actual decision is OP has successfully negotiated 100,000 from Darden. That is great work. Well done. And that is the classic first stage of a negotiation that we do with clients when they get multiple offers. And I think before OP was probably leaning towards Ross, and now has a genuine dilemma. Now, the first thing OP should do, in my opinion, is go back to Ross and say, I have a 100K scholarship from Darden. It's a bigger scholarship. What are you going to do? I would not be surprised at all if Ross come back with another 40, 50, 60K. And then you've got an even more difficult, but an also strong, also great decision to make. And I think that's quite likely. I would hazard a guess at 50% chance of that working in your favor, that negotiation. So coming back to the actual decision at hand, let's assume that Ross came back and say, nah, we're done. 80K is done. 80K is the max. Then the decision to me. Well, let me talk about the factors that I'd think about when comparing. The first thing between these two schools that jumps to mind is the focus on the learning style. Michigan Ross has got, and is very clear about this action based learning. They talk about MAP all over the place in their website, in their application portal, etc. And that is basically this idea of taking the theory and applying it in practice. And for some people, that works really, really well. In contrast, Darden has a focus on the case method. A handful of schools have this. HBS is the famous one, but also ESA in Spain have the case method. And there, your learning style is very much focused on studying ahead of the class, building up an opinion based on a case, and debating a case in the class. And this method is used for everything from accounting to CSR classes, to, all around. And it basically is good because it positions you as a leader to make a difficult decision. Consultants also love it because casing is how consultants recruit. The consultancy firms know it, and they tend to overrepresent from the case-based schools. So that, to me, that distinction is going to be one of the key factors. And if one of those feels way more attractive than the other, that would be a heavy factor in the decision. Now, the other factor is geographical, both in terms of where do you want to live. Obviously, if you want to be based in the Midwest, Michigan is better. If you want to be based sort of around UVA, then that would be better. Personally, after a negotiation with Ross, I would be leaning towards UVA for the pure reason that I wouldn't be able to handle the Midwestern winters. And that's just a personal decision. I neither, like, not just during the program, but also I think it would put me off settling near Michigan long term. And so, where do you want to be settled long term after the program? For me, it would be the choice would be UVA. Add in the 20K difference. I'm leaning that way. And I think as I look through the comments, a lot of people are broadly agreeing with me. Seeing Darden, and these are really upvoted comments as well. Darden. I think the consensus on this would be Darden, unless you can get 50K or so out of Ross, and then there's a question. Another 50K, I should say, out of Ross, and then there's a question.
Okay. Okay, all right, Sam, that's all of our profiles for today. Thank you for the posts.
Great stuff. Great stuff. And also supported by the great little graphic. I mean, you could see their consultant, can't you, when they make a graphic for their Reddit, for their Reddit post. Better than our graphic, Mel, I think.
Maybe we should upgrade,
Hire Natasha for our thumbnails. All right. Lovely to see you again, Mal. And great roast as usual. If you'd like to have your profile roasted, send us a DM and flag it to us, and we will include it in our next profiles to roast. If you want to watch more of these, we roast unwilling and unsuspecting Reddit profiles every week in, week out. Like and subscribe to the channel to get notifications about those. And we'll be adding these as comments to all of the individual profiles as we go, so that to make sure that people see the roast that is relevant to them. Mal, thank you very much as usual, and enjoy a little bit of downtime as round 2 starts to wind down. And I will see you next week.
See you next week.
Take care.
All right.